welcome to everyone who's just joining us. Looks like everyone's still connecting to audio, but welcome to everyone who's just joining us for the final webinar in our series in the Lunch and Learns on Marketing and Sales. A few people just connecting to the audio, so I'll do the proper introduction once everyone's connected. Nice to see some familiar names there. Great to see some people coming back again. That's great. Lovely. So for those of you who have just joined us, welcome to the final, very sadly, but the final in our series on how COVID-19 is disrupting marketing and sales. This is the 7th webinar in the series. For those of you who come to some of the webinars previously, and I can see some familiar names there, which is lovely, you will know that the whole purpose of this webinar series really is about understanding how the world of work, how the world of business, how the world of organisations has been changing during lockdown and what that means for some of the trends that we will see beyond that. And today we're going to be looking at a topic which feels like it's especially timely, particularly at the moment when very sadly we're starting to see lots of news about jobs coming through as the furlough scheme comes to an end, but also some very exciting potentially trends coming through around the sorts of jobs that they're going to be in a few years' time, the impact of tech upon the workforce, and what the future staffing trends will look like in the UK a year or two from now. And that's very much the spirit in which I'd like us all to approach the webinar today, that whilst this is a really challenging period, there's still lots that we can all do to grow our careers and to develop them and to think about where we'd like to be in a few years' time and how we can start preparing for that now. So in a few minutes' time, I'm going to be introducing you to our fantastic panel of speakers. I can't really think of 3 people better than the trio that I have here today on the panel to advise you all about what you should be doing in terms of developing careers and skills and how to do that during a particularly challenging time. As we have said in previous webinars, I like to encourage everyone, speakers and also delegates, to have their cameras on if you can. I know people can't always because of connectivity and bandwidth and all those sorts of things, but if you can, it's lovely to see everyone's faces, so please do have your camera on if possible. When others are speaking, if you could make sure that you are on mute, that's always gratefully appreciated. It means that everyone can get heard, and we do encourage you to use this as an opportunity for discussion and to talk to others. So that means that if you've got something to say, please do put your hand up either physically or by using the reactions button at the bottom corner of the screen on the right hand side. Or if you want to, please do put your question in the chat box. And we do encourage you to use this webinar to really learn from others and to get your questions out there. Okay, so we've talked about the webinar series, we've talked about what we're going to be doing today, focusing on career progression during COVID-19. We've talked about some of the housekeeping stuff. And so now we want to hear from all of you. So what I'd like you to do, again using the chat box, is to name one thing that you've noticed about the effect that COVID-19 is having on career progression. So if you could put that into the chat box at the bottom of the screen, that would be great. It could be a trend that you've noticed. It could be something that's changing things for your organisation. It could be something that's happening to some of your friends and contacts. So we're really interested to hear what your experiences are in that area, what you have noticed. So if you could put your observations into the chat box, and then we will have a bit of a discussion about them before we get started. So over to you. Please do share a trend that you've noticed about the impact that the pandemic has had on career progression. And if you could pop that into the chat box when you're ready, that would be great. Oh, thank you, Sophia. That's a really interesting insight. Are you able to say a bit more about that? Sophia? That was a really helpful contribution. Are you able to say a bit more about that?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't realise I was fully muted. Hi.
Oh, don't worry. I do that all the time. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Go for it.
So I'm 21, so I'm quite early in my career, and I didn't go to university and started an apprenticeship. So I've now been in my organisation for a while, and my friends leaving university have found that jobs that they had applied for a few months ago, or like schemes that they were definitely going to be joining once they'd finished, have started to be cancelled or postponed to next year, which they believe means will be cancelled next year. So a lot of my friends leaving university and starting their careers are in a really unfortunate position. And I think that's the same for a lot of people my age. So it's a real shame for them all, really. So I feel quite lucky.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us, and absolutely, certainly one of the news stories that seems to be coming up pretty much every day is about the impact of the pandemic on young people and their careers. So what I really hope we can do for you today, and hopefully you'll be able to feed this back to your friends as well, is through the panel discussion give you some practical ideas about what people in younger demographics can still do to move their careers forward during a challenging time. But absolutely, I agree. There's many challenges out there, and we will do what we can to get you and your friends thinking about what we can do next. Lovely. Thank you very much, Sophia, for sharing that. Robin, do you want to say a bit more about these digital skills that people are learning in the events industry?
Yeah. Hi, Zoe. Hi, all. No, it's just something that that I have noticed personally. I'm tutoring and coaching a number of apprentices in the event industry, and obviously it's a slightly worrying time for the event industry because there's been lots of events that have had to be postponed. But one of the very positive things that is happening is that many of the apprentices that I'm working with have the pleasure to work with. They are actually learning some really dynamic new skills in the digital side of events, which of course helps them in terms of their overall knowledge and their overall skills within the events industry. So that we all try and find the positives. It's a very kind of disruptive time at the moment, but that's one of the positives that certainly is coming out at the moment.
Thank you, Robin. That's a really good insight, and there is that saying, isn't there, that upskill in a downturn. And I remember vividly during the 2008 crash, a number of my peers, myself included, went off and did qualifications at that point, because there's nothing like a crisis to get you thinking about which skills you really need to accumulate so that you're in a better position as you come out of that crisis. So thank you. That's another really good insight to share with us. So thank you. Jamie, this is a really interesting one. Do you want to say a bit more about us, the proactivity point?
Yeah, it was mainly just, I think before the pandemic, we kind of all, like I certainly had, I'd kind of settled into habits and was doing, I'd had opportunities to show new skills and stuff every now and then. But I think now that everything's kind of changed so rapidly, it's an opportunity to show to, especially our, managers, bosses, whatever, that we're capable of more than just what we've shown them so far. And I think like key word there is proactiveness, really, new ideas that they might not have thought of. I think one example with me was when I suggested that we have our CEO, because our CEO does quarterly briefings to the whole organisation, and we normally do that at our local cinema. So we have like a big projector and do it in one of the screens. But I suggested that we just do it through a live stream on it's like Slack kind of. We have Workplace though by Facebook. For a live stream on there, and that went really well. So I think things like that, new ideas that you kind of didn't have space or opportunity to share before, we've got that now. Especially people that are still further new to the organisation and have still got a lot to prove and show. Good opportunity.
Jamie, I love that. I think that's brilliant, and you're exactly right. This is the moment when people need to solve problems, and if you've got different ideas that perhaps haven't been listened to previously, or where there hasn't been an opportunity to try them out, now is the moment to share them with people. So I think that's fantastic, and that's another way to show how all of us can add value to our respective organisations. So that's a great insight, and that doesn't cost a great deal of time or money to do, does it? That's the other brilliant thing about it. Great example, thank you there. So lots of brilliant ideas coming through. And before we move on to the Q&A, you're listed as Kay Felstead, so I don't know your first name, but perhaps you could tell us your first name and also share a bit more about this example, if that's okay.
Yes, so my first name's Kay. So I found that people are learning more skills and taking the opportunity to learn things more now than what they would have done before the pandemic. So, for example, I've always said, I want to learn French and a little bit of sign language, and I've actually been able to take this opportunity to use sign language. And I don't know if I'll have the opportunity to use that within my organisation, but I do know that we have had a couple of deaf people come into the office, and there have been other people who have been able to communicate with them. I've also never used Teams before, and we're using that now, and I wouldn't say I'm experienced, but I'm at least confident enough to use it, whereas before I would have had meetings face to face in an office with people, and now I'm doing it digitally. So yeah, I think people are learning more things now than what they would have before, because they've got the time to, and they have to.
That's a great example for Kay. I love that, again, because it's about using this crisis situation as an opportunity to try new things, isn't it?
Yeah.
And let's face it, when things are normal and going well, it can be that much harder to find opportunities to stretch yourself. But in a moment like this, we all need to stretch ourselves, and we all need to raise our game and keep our skills sharp. So that's a great example. Thank you. Brilliant. So lots of really interesting trends coming through there, everything from soft skills to slightly more technical skills to how different sectors are changing during the pandemic and the impact on careers and job progression. So we have three fantastic panelists joining us today who we're going to talk about all of those themes and more with. We have Louise Rogers, we have Richard Goodwin, and we have Anne Tanner, and we're delighted to have them here. So I'm just going to share a little bit about all of them. So Louise Rogers, some of you will know very well. So she's enjoyed a 25-year career in public relations. She's worked in-house and as a consultant. She's worked with everyone from housing associations to property developers, luxury hotels to interior designers and architects. She founded a niche PR agency, building it from a startup to employing 15 people. And in 2014, she retrained as a business and personal coach. And she now develops bespoke coaching programs for consultancies in the built environment. And there's a really strong theme in Louise's work about how she's helping the next generation of leaders to succeed more in senior roles. She's also a trustee of two charities working with young people, London Youth and Our Time. And she's a coach tutor with JGA supporting for PR apprentices. Welcome, Louise. Also very happy to be joined by Richard Goodwin, who lots of you will also know very well. So his career has spanned 20 years in marketing, sales and strategy roles in British Steel and the stationery office. And since 2015, Richard has been the managing director of JGA Group, leading it to the West London Business Award for Best Education and Training Provider 2019. In recent years, JGA has expanded in entrepreneurial fashion, building completely new types of training provision and facing changes which have helped it to adapt its marketing mix to the COVID-19 era. So we're very much looking forward to hearing from Richard as well. And last but not least, very pleased to be joined by Anne Tanner. She is a consultant who focuses on giving career advice, and she's been working in the advice and guidance sector for over 10 years. Her main role is as an assessor to facilitate delivery of the generic advice and guidance qualifications, and career information and guidance at level 4 and 6. She's a qualified trainer. She's worked with excluded and disaffected young people, often on the verge of receiving custodial sentencing. And she's also supported young people who need to do better at school as well, working with them one-to-one and also in groups. And her mission is very much about helping her clients get the best support and to move those conversations into realistic discussions about short and long-term goals. And also said here that she loves animals and has a gorgeous black Labrador. So I'm hoping she's brought along some photos of the Labrador later. Who doesn't love a lovely dog photo? Excellent, very good. So welcome Louise, welcome Richard, and welcome Anne. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Great
Hi,
stuff.
thank you.
Hello, hello.
Hiya.
Lovely. Well, great to have the three of you here today. And I think what's really good and really came out of those potted biographies that you sent over is the range of your experience and the different types of sectors that you've all worked in during your careers. And I'm sure that will feed through to lots of really interesting insights to share with our delegates. And I suppose that's a good place to start, actually, reflecting on the very broad and varied experience that you all have about some of the different trends that you've noticed when you've been speaking to learners, when you've been speaking to people in your network since the pandemic began. What are the trends that you've noticed? What are people asking you about career progression and skills? So Richard, shall we start with you? What big questions are people asking you about career progression and skills since the pandemic began?
I think, first of all, actually, I'd like to pick on Sophia's point about friends leaving university and the jobs disappearing and stuff. And I'm not sure of how actionable this is, but I think people tend to underestimate the impact of the economy on the jobs market, and how that may mean that there's a period of however long it is when you are on the job market and you don't have things. And of course, the earlier you go into the jobs market, the more options you have, because if you, let's say you were 16, for example, and you could, if the jobs market wasn't looking good, you could go to college or stay at school or whatever else until you're 17 or 18. And if you're 18, you could do a degree or do other things that aren't finding a way in the job market. Of course, when you hit 21 or 22, I guess your options are master's degree, which only a small minority of people do and cost a lot of money, or you're just a bit stuck. And I think it's just one factor people need to take into account of in their decision for when they're going to, how again they run their lives in terms of education, whether they go to university or whether they do an apprenticeship, yeah. or other equivalent options.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Richard. Yeah.
And what was the and? There was quite a good and. It's Kay's point, I think. Yeah, it's Kay and Jamie's point, really, that I think COVID is a time of change, and this is picking up what you said. When things have changed quite radically, it suddenly is a level playing field between people who've just started a role and people who've been there for 10 years, because there are a lot of things that you're doing you need to do differently, and you need to do differently for everybody. It doesn't matter whether you've been there 10 years, 20 years, or whether you're brand new. And when people are looking at who do we promote, who do we give pay rises to, who's the future senior management, it really levels it out and potentially gives lots of opportunities for younger people who are more adaptable, or for older people who are more adaptable, but those people who are more adaptable. And I think managers always look, or directors always look and say, who's got a solution for me to whatever the problem currently is? And if that's the junior marketing person or the junior salesperson, then that person tends to rise very quickly in the organization thereafter. So I think it's a really important point, and picking up skills that are relevant, even if it's sign language and being the person in the office who knows sign language when somebody next comes in, absolutely is a benefit, because it gets you noticed and it means you're a solution rather than a challenge for people. In terms of other things, I think that LinkedIn actually is the new norm, is to announce your own redundancy on LinkedIn. I see this all the time now from experienced managers often, and to announce their availability for other opportunities. I think it gives a bit of space for mutual support from friends and colleagues and other people they know, as well as actually having a career purpose. And definitely using LinkedIn to job hunt is really one of the big changes since the last recession. Last recession, of those who remember, it was basically LinkedIn was for IT people, but now it's for most business and management professions. There are some that aren't there, like teachers, for example, but generally speaking, it's the place to be if you're in business and you aspire to being senior at some point. And LinkedIn is also a good source of training. I think that never underestimate how to use LinkedIn well is a skill, just like it's using any social media is a skill, as we've discussed in previous lunch and learn sessions. But there is plenty of training out there. There's videos of how to make the most of LinkedIn, how to develop your network, and how to develop the sort of relationships that do mean you get a job or you get a promotion or you get a pay rise further down the line.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Richard. And it's really interesting what you were saying about LinkedIn, because on Friday I noticed someone who posting on LinkedIn about how they had helped someone get a job on LinkedIn who had gone on there to post that they'd been made redundant. So you're right, it's absolutely something that's accepted on there and where people are really happy to help. So it's a great point, definitely more that everyone can do with that platform. Lovely, great. So Louise, can we hear from you now about some of the trends that you're hearing around career questions and skills questions from learners and other people in your network?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's less about trends and things I've picked up that I think can be really helpful, both for our learners and, Sophia, for anybody who finds themselves suddenly in a position where they're having to rethink what their original plans were. And I've grouped my remarks together onto 4 points. I'm happy to come back to any of them in the Q&A. And the first one is around the opportunity to gain visibility and how visibility can bring new opportunities. You know, online communication, it's a great leveler, and younger people are often more comfortable than others with things online. So you can use it to increase your visibility, but you do have to be aware whilst doing that of your personal brand. So be careful what you're saying, how you think through what you're saying, and how you present yourself online. I think it's important if you're going to have that increased visibility. The second one has already been raised by Jamie, I think, and it's about demonstrating your strengths. Perhaps putting yourself forward for tasks and responsibilities that wouldn't normally be part of your job. For example, one of my learners has taken on a great deal of responsibility for circulating well-being and running a well-being channel on Slack for her organisation, because it's her particular area of interest. So, as somebody else said, solving problems, being seen to demonstrate your strengths, including the ability to be flexible and adaptable. It's not what it was, it is what it is. Being seen to be very proactive about working with how things are at the moment. The third one is around learning and development opportunities. It's already been raised, and it's true, there are loads of things out there at the moment. Another one of my learners has just completed a course outside of JGA on content marketing and coding, which is going to be incredibly helpful for her. She even got a certificate. She researched that course and found it on her own, and it was free. So there's lots of opportunities around online that weren't previously there. And Biddy made the point in the chat room earlier about volunteering. My son, who has found himself unemployed after a master's, has in fact set up a community network for his streets, the area immediately around where he lives, picking up prescriptions for people and doing a bit of shopping. So it's something that he can put on his CV as being a community impact that he's been able to have. And the last one, which is more coachy, is about developing a gratitude mindset. In order to kind of get more credit, you have to give more credit. So recognizing that decisions are being made by your managers and leaders in really difficult and trying circumstances, and they're grappling with many of the same uncertainties that you are. No one has all the answers at the moment. So don't be the one who publicly makes negative remarks about those decisions. Be seen to be supportive, and as I say, that gratitude mindset, thinking about things that are within your areas of control rather than things that you can't control, and then taking positive action on those. So that was a quick rattle through 4 of the main things that I think I wanted to say today.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Louise. And I love that point about the volunteering as well, and thinking about how that can also, as well as doing good, be a brilliant thing to add to your CV and what that says about your organisational abilities as well as the other soft skills that you have too. So definitely a brilliant thing to be doing at the moment, as well as all the other learning and development stuff that you mentioned. So thank you for that. And Anne, can we hear from you now about some of the trends around careers and skills, some of the questions that you're being asked at the moment in your work?
The main question I'm being asked at the moment is the fact that, can I do my qualification quicker? I do actually deliver level 6 careers advice and guidance. And whereas people would normally take possibly 18 months to do it, I'm getting people doing it as quickly as 4 to 6 months, just because they are at home, they've been furloughed, and they're just getting the work out, which is great for me, but they just want their qualifications. I've also noticed that there's a lot of apprenticeships that have been closed, and people have actually been made redundant through the apprenticeships. So I think that's pretty worrying, because if you're in the middle of apprenticeship, where do you continue it? Where do you move forward after that? So as I would say, 2 words really with coronavirus, it's uncertainty and change. Are any of us actually safe? A prime example that I would never have considered participating in a panel before. It's well out of my comfort zone, but we all need to look at new opportunities and add as many strings to our bows as possible. Everything we do, every network we could make is a new opportunity. We've got to look at happenstance, recognise every possibility and look for things that are possibly unplanned, because that is what this is all about. The UK has been in lockdown now since mid-March, and the government have told us to stay at home and sort of protect the NHS and save lives, which is what we're all trying to do. The city centres are empty. There's a massive recruitment drive to increase numbers in the care sector and logistics and food retail. As of June the 14th, there'd be over 9 million people on government job retention schemes, and we're on a 4-nation approach to bring the nations back together and to bring everything back together to support everybody. The trouble is, these 4 nations approaches are difficult, they're not consistent, and it's just really frustrating. So what we need to do is to remember what labour market intelligence actually is. We need to know where the job sectors are, what the occupations are, where the localities are, what the pay scales are, and the way things are changing. E-commerce, for instance, has changed the way businesses operate, and subsequently the way that administration and finance workers operate. Everybody wants job security, which is probably not going to happen for a little while now, but we've got to be realistic about it, and everything that we do is actually adding to our transferable skills, and people need to broaden their aspirations. And if their first choice isn't available, they need to look at other options. What could those other options be? Will it be something that could lead them in a step moving forward? They've got to be realistic about what they can actually do. We had the foot and mouth disease back in the back, where farming and rural tourism jobs were lost, but we've made a comeback on that, and we will again with coronavirus. We've just got to make sure that people carry on training. Look for the free courses that are on Read. There's plenty of them. Sorry, JGA, but that's where I've been looking. But there are actual free courses there. Look at these free courses. Look on the internet. Just find out where the free courses are, or the really cheap courses that you can do. But we need to stay focused and sort of make sure that, if nothing else on our CV, we're showing that you're trying, that you're making changes, that you're still training. And without a doubt, that's probably one of the first things you've got to do. If you look on the National Career Service website, there's lots of up-to-date available information to help you. And things like the Buzz Quiz, little interactive quizzes that you can do that will show you other possibilities. We just need to be open-minded at all times. We need to look what's in the demography. The care sector is always going to be needing people, and probably more and more so now. We're in an ageing population. It might not be what some people's ideal job is, but it might give them a little bit of work experience, and it will give them sort of a way to move forward possibly. We need to look at education and training. There's a drive now for teachers, teaching assistants, and with that I'm sure it's going to come along with mental health and people that support pastorally. Obviously, technical changes, we're going to need a lot of work being done there. Delivery drivers, food retail places. There's lots of opportunities out there, but we've just got to find what they are. Cybersecurity is another one. I mean, with the impact now of all this technology, cybersecurity is going to be more and more vulnerable, so to speak, and there's going to be a huge requirement for specialists in there. I think that's pretty much all I've got to say, really, but it's just really just being not specific in what you want to do, being open-minded and just taking every opportunity that you can possibly take.
May I cut in for a second?
Yes, you may.
Just picking up one of your points, I think there is an important point in there that an industry's reputation does not necessarily define the jobs that are within that industry. So, for example, you say care, and I don't know about everybody else, but I instantly think of minimum wage, domiciliary care, where somebody's going around to people's houses and helping them live and cope with life, or work with people with some big challenges. But if you actually look at the care industry as a whole, it has a lot in common with the hospitality industry. So if you have a care home, it has a manager, it has a porter, it has maintenance teams, it has kitchen staff, it has all these roles that are just the same as you'd have in a hotel, whether that's the Ritz or the Premier Inn. And the roles in that sort of industry are not just medical. They're not just the people who go around actually working with the service users.
That's right. It's also
so there's a big push at the moment to move people from the hospitality world, where the hotels are pretty much shut down, into the care sector. And that's not to make everyone into a nurse or a care assistant. That's actually in these sorts of roles. So some of these sectors need to do a better job at helping people to understand that what they offer. And you're right, it's transferable skills, if you call it like that.
Yeah. I know my mum was in a care home, and you have people that come and entertain, you have people that go in and do hairdressing, you have people that go and do their nails and sort of little bits of massage and things like that. There's lots of opportunities out there in the care home.
And they have marketing people, and they even have salespeople.
Yes.
If it's the right sort of organisation.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point, isn't it? Because at a time when there will be lots of people looking for work, those people who are in the position of being employers still need to think about how they can get the right people to be applying for their roles. And therefore, as you say, Richard, and as you say, Anne, as well, they need to be thinking about how they can market themselves and to really share the variety of roles that they have. So that's a really reassuring thought, because it shows there is still an aspect of it being a two-way street, even if there is a lot of demand for some of the roles that are out there. So on that point, it would be really interesting, building on what the three of you have said, to think a bit more about how people can really consider the transferable skills they have, or perhaps even look to develop some of those transferable skills. I guess where I'm going with this question is thinking about how people can best look at planning to grow their skills during a pandemic, because I think what's come across beautifully from all of your responses and the insights that we've had so far is the need to be flexible and the need to be adaptable. And as Anne was rightly saying, and Richard and Louise alluded to as well, being open-minded. We all know stories of people, don't we, who after something really challenging happened to, or if you can remember the 2008 crash very clearly as I can, people who went on to really interesting opportunities in time that wouldn't have been on their radar had they not perhaps been made redundant or suddenly thought about doing something different. So it'd be great to hear a bit more about how we can all really plan for that adaptability. How can we stay open-minded, and how can we plan our skills and also our career development accordingly? Should we start with you, Louise? You've got your hand up.
I have got my hand up because I'm reminded of two people I know who run events businesses, and I know I'm PR, not events, but I've had a lot to do with events in my time, and just the two different responses that they've both have. that are about their strengths, but it's actually about sort of boiling down their strengths. It's distilling them to what what their core strengths are. And both of them are very good at bringing people together. So one of them ran an events company that did big events in the property industry, annual events, physically present events with exhibition stands and speakers on a stage and the whole thing. He's completely redesigned his business to be an online business now. So he runs webinars for leaders in local authorities that people are actually paying to attend. He's got sponsorship. So his business has pivoted itself completely, and that's because we did some work around addressing what his fundamental skills were, the things that he could practice wherever he was and whatever he was doing. And it did boil down to bringing people together, having a really, really strong network and a good instinct for things that are current. And he brought those together and realized he didn't need to have physical event spaces anymore. So that's one. The other one is a caterer locally who lost most of her business overnight. She does big weddings and events all across London. She really stepped outside of her comfort zone and boiled down her core strengths, which were a real passion for food and a real passion for getting other people passionate about healthy eating and about food. So she now does live Instagram events where she cooks online. She managed to create healthy meals for NHS workers free. She then started developing really lovely afternoon tea packages with a bottle of fizz that she delivered to people's homes personally that they paid for. So she used her skills again of bringing people together and her strengths of having a kind of understanding of her industry and what people needed from her during a time of crisis, and then addressing that with really bespoke services from her organization. So I just think they're two really good examples of, as you say, understanding what your strengths are, and then that word that seems to have entered our vocabulary, pivoting those and using them in a different way to address what the immediate needs are.
Yeah, that's a great example, Louise, and such a fantastic story from two people who obviously are in industries that are really challenged at the moment. But yet, as you say, they realised what their strengths are, and that enabled them to change and to pivot and to find a way through it. So thank you. That's a really encouraging thing for people to hear today. And Richard, any thoughts from you then about how people can adapt and plan for making the most of those different opportunities that are out there, even during a really challenging time?
It was interesting. My wife was head of marketing operations at Capita, and she was made redundant in February, I think. No, December, February, whatever it was, pre-COVID, but not much pre-COVID. And she took the opportunity to take some time off and do some stuff. But she also thought, okay, what are the things that I'd really like to learn a bit more about? So she started learning Spanish. She had career. She thought, well, maybe she was very burnt out, and she thought maybe I can't stand the thought of launching another website in my entire life. Maybe I'd like data science. So she's taken the opportunity to do some online data science courses. Photography. She bought a camera and did some online photography courses. I tell you, the money's in online courses at the moment. And at the end of it, she's come to think, and a few months later, she comes to the conclusion, well, actually, she's been relaunching our website, JGA's website. And she's come to the conclusion, actually, she just quite like doing it. She likes the data side of the marketing operations. What she didn't like was, after 25 years of career, all in mammoth companies, British Steel and Capita, that she was fed up with working in companies that were quite so large. She doesn't want anything our size, but something with a few thousand staff as opposed to 70,000 staff would be good. A happy medium between having no one looking at your website at any one time and so many people looking at your website that you've got to go through 4 layers of bureaucracy to make any changes, for example. So, but the most interesting thing is she had this hankering to look at data science as a career possibility. So she did some online courses, and they were cheap. I don't know, I can't remember what she paid, 20 quid each, I think, for 2 or 3 of them. And she's come to the conclusion that while she's enjoying it, actually, she can't see herself doing it for the rest of her life. So COVID has given an opportunity to decide what she doesn't want to do, as well as help her back to decide what she does want to do. So it's a time for taking stock and learning those skills. Sometimes they make a difference to your career decisions in future.
My daughter referred to it the other day as being the great pause. And I think that sums it up nicely. And I do understand, Sophia and Jamie, that when you're starting out on your careers, it's harder to think positive about, you know, we've had Richard's wife and me, we've had opportunities to have one kind of career and then pivot into another. And the two people I've just talked about have their own businesses, so we're able to have that. And it's harder when you're younger and you're just starting out. But as I say, working out what you don't want to do, what your values are, what's important to you, what your passions, what are your strengths, and how to apply those initially perhaps in ways that you won't get paid for, but that will help you to build a positive CV and a set of positive experiences and expand your network, are all things that I think can be done during this great pause.
Yeah.
That's Anne, sorry, you were going to come in there, go for it.
One of the activities that we've done with the younger people is actually to look at industries and to let them identify for themselves what comes out of those industries. So like Richard was saying, what could be involved in a care home, look at actually what's involved in making a packet of shreddies or doing this job or doing that job, but actually look at all the side jobs that are available there and sort of make people understand that actually I could do that or I am capable of doing that.
And I think that when you enter an industry, you never quite know where it's going to go. So my uncle many decades ago was an assistant trainee, probably apprentice chef actually at a post house. And he ended up running the hotel and catering industry training board, as managerial as you like. So just because the image of the industry doesn't necessarily mean there aren't opportunities for all sorts of roles.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Those are great stories there, because I think there's something in both of them about following your instincts and using the great pause. Love that phrase.
Yeah, so do I.
Yes, it's great, isn't it? Because it's about thinking about, well, what am I really interested in? What am I drawn to? So let's explore that further. And then Richard, as you say, accepting there are going to be some things that you try out and they may not be the thing you do for the next 20 years, but at least you've tried them and thought about them and tested it. And just thinking about those areas which really resonate with you and which you're curious about. So I think there's something here about making the most of those opportunities if you can. Excellent. Right, so the panel would love to hear your questions now. So what are the burning questions that you would like answered around career progression and developing skills? You know, what's the one thing that the panel could answer for you today that's going to get you thinking about where you, or indeed your peers or your friends, could go from here? So you can either put your hand up and or use the reaction button to say that you'd like to speak, or of course you can put it into the chat. So who's got a question they would like to put to our panel?
Come on, somebody must have.
From the things that we've talked about in the icebreaker exercise, it feels like there's lots of interesting themes here which came up. So perhaps I could kick off with a question of mine whilst delegates are still thinking. So the point around volunteering has come up a few times. So Louise, you talked about that. And Biddy, I can see here that you mentioned that in the comments earlier. Do the three of you have any advice around perhaps thinking about which sorts of volunteering you should be looking at, because there's a lot of opportunities out there, aren't there?
I think that there are, another example comes to mind. A young woman I saw on Facebook recently, actually she was featured in The Guardian. She started a service that was people giving old books and then her putting on Facebook what books were available and delivering them in the southeast London area. So cycling around, delivering books. She has managed to grow a network of about 350 people who are using her book service. So she took a passion that she had, which was books and recycling and reusing and sharing, completely voluntary. So she created her own voluntary effort. She didn't go out and find one. And then if I think about the charities that I support, they are all charities that work with young people and young, engaged socially minded people are in high demand in the voluntary sector, and you can use all the social media that you're so adept at using to find out where those opportunities may be, and maybe positively approach organisations whose work you're interested in and see what you can do, because at this time there's lots that people can do.
That's right, and even like with the teacher, if your passion is to teach in the future, go along to a school and do some reading with the kids, spend some time with the kids and actually work with them. The schools are going to be really grateful for that moving forward.
I think that doing things voluntarily is great, and it's made a difference to my life. But I think the bigger question, even than that, is say yes a lot. If people say, do you want to do X, or are you available for Y, or say yes, try it. Don't like it, say no. Don't say no because you don't think you're going to like it without actually going along and trying whatever it happens to be, whether it's voluntary or whether it's something at work or a new project or a new division, or whether it's something learning or doing something with friends. And there's a book out there, Yes Man, which was made into a movie a few years ago, about a guy who said for the next, I can't remember, couple of weeks, I'm going to say yes to everything, and about what happens to his life. And things open, opportunities open, you see a different perspective if you just say yes to stuff. People say no far too much. I'll give you for example of saying yes to things in my life that made a difference. A long time ago, 10 years ago maybe, I got an email from University of Warwick when I studied at University of Warwick, and they said, we'd like to start an alumni network in London. Anyone interested? So I said, yeah. I emailed back, yes. And then they said, these are the details of the meeting. So I said, fine. Then they postponed it and moved it. So I said, fine. So I turned up, and in Pontoon Dock in East London, in the Little Docklands, and there were 20 odd people there, I think. And they said, who wants to chair this new alumni network? And I think it was pretty much the last person around the table. And they went around everyone said, oh no, I'm far too busy. Oh no. And I said, yes. I thought, if nothing else, it looked good on the CV. So, and I chaired it. And actually, I and the deputy chair worked like stink for 4 years to make it work. And we started from nothing, where I supplied essentially all the speakers, because I was willing to take the hit. If nobody turned up to a speaking do or a networking do, and it was embarrassing, then I didn't mind for people I knew, because I could always warn them in advance. Whereas other people were always wary about embarrassing themselves by inviting bosses along or whatever it might be, if with no audience. And we got to, and I used to be on LinkedIn till sort of 1 o'clock in the morning in the week before these events, just making sure that if somebody had a query, then I answered it personally. If somebody put something on making sure all the LinkedIn groups I could think of had a link to it, even if it was only going to make 1 or 2 people's difference, which if it had been commercial venture, absolutely wouldn't have been commercial. But what it meant was 3 years down the line, when I handed it over, the people I handed it over to knew all they had to do was send out an email, and they'd get 40, 50 people turning up. Whereas at the beginning, every bum on every seat was a bonus, frankly. And that taught me that I could absolutely grow something and start it from scratch. And I brought that into the whole way we won't run JGA. Now, if there's an opportunity, we'll do it. We'll say yes, and then we'll see what happens. And the way we entered the new apprenticeships market reflects that. And the way we've entered the endpoint assessment market reflects that. We've said, okay, let's get somebody good. Let's put it out there that we do it and see what happens. And it changed my life. And so I recommend it to anybody, frankly.
That's a great example. That's a great example. Thank you, Richard. It's really lovely idea there around just being open again and trying new things, and then really using those new experiences to reflect on what you've learned and what else that can then add to your CV and also to you as a person as well. So that's a brilliant example of what happens when you can say yes and where that could go to next. Jamie, you've put an excellent question here about marketing opportunities, and I can see some discussion going on about that in the chat. Do you want to put that question to the panel? I think it's about the increase or decrease in marketing job opportunities.
Yeah, that's about it really. I don't really know if I can elaborate much on it really. I know Louise has already given a response, but it's just just because you mentioned LinkedIn before, and I did, just out of curiosity, I mean, I'm quite comfortable in my current job, but just out of curiosity, I did have a look at some of the opportunities, and I was just curious to know if that's a higher number or a lower number than what we were seeing previously, really.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I can see in some line industries, there'll be less marketing people, but also perhaps more in others. So, Louise, do you want to say a bit more about the answer that you shared with Jamie?
Yeah, I was just saying that I think there will be an increase because there's a lot of products and services out there that are necessary and desired, and it's just the route to those audiences, isn't it? So I think having an understanding of what the trends are and the new ways of reaching people, and on top of what I put in the chat, I would also say that I think this comes down actually to personal brand as well, your own personal brand, because you have an opportunity to market yourself. So to think about how you would market yourself for new opportunities, being aware of your social media footprint, when and how you speak up on things like this. You've done a great job, Jamie, already. But on LinkedIn discussions, comments you might make on posts there, it's creating that whole, as I say, personal brand and increasing your own visibility, because that kind of illustrates that you can do it for other people. So I think that people who are looking for marketing people or learners will be looking at those people who know how to market themselves primarily.
With an increase probably on social media marketing.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Numerically, I don't know overall, Jamie, is a short answer from me, but I think it's definitely accelerating the pre-existing trends within marketing. So marketing, people used to think of marketing as being able to do pretty pictures, some print collateral, maybe to attend an event or two or run an event or two. And the trends in marketing are far towards project management, data literacy, all the stuff that is to do with increasing amounts of digital and online usage and marketing, getting at people, understanding not just how to get the most out of Google, but the whole delivery of your services is more online. Then you need to be more au fait with how online works, and it's a slightly different mindset and slightly different set of skills. So I think the balance of roles within marketing as a function and the broader sales and marketing functions, how you build relationships, for example, if you're in sales or even in marketing and certainly in PR, is different. It's different if you're using social media or LinkedIn or Google or even just online chats, for example, to build relationships with clients and customers, or in your case, stakeholders, than it is in the oldie world where you'd put leaflets through doors, or you'd knock on the door and have a chat, or you'd have people who knocked on the door and had a chat. And don't get me wrong, things don't happen overnight. It's not going to suddenly go from 0 of one and 100% of the other to the other way around. And people always underestimate the impact of change in the long term and tend to overestimate it in the short term because things take time to change. But absolutely, project management and digital understanding and a mode of thinking, and combining that with some of the more traditional disciplines, I think is of increasing importance.
That's a great point, because it's thinking about what skill set will marketers need in a couple of years' time, and how can I prepare for that accordingly. And just on Jamie's point, just to tease some of those ideas out a bit more, because I think something that came up a bit there, and also throughout the contributions and the discussion earlier, was about personal brand. So I just wondered if any of the panel had a tip or a couple of tips that they could share with delegates about how to develop and grow their personal brands at a time like this. Louise, I've got a feeling that you're burning to say something on that.
Yeah, it seems to be my area. When I'm working as a coach with clients around personal brand, it's first of all having, and I've already referred to it, it's about distilling what's really important to you, what your values are, where you see your strengths and your values, and what you can contribute, which sounds like, it may not sound like a particularly marketing, digitally focused way of doing things, but it means that if you can be totally authentic in how you're putting across yourself, people naturally and instinctively warm to that authenticity. I have to mention my podcast, of course. I launched a podcast a few weeks ago, partly out of wanting to, completely out of wanting to try a new way of reaching people. I feel that marketing and PR and in particular those things, you need to be giving something rather than just selling something. People need, content is really important. People need to feel they're getting value out of engaging with you, and building a personal brand around having a contribution to make based on your values and your strengths and your core skill set, I think is critical there.
Excellent, thank you, Louise. So really, again, playing to your strengths. Anne, are you able to share some thoughts, perhaps in summing up in a minute, about how people can develop and grow their personal brands at a time like this?
It's just having that deep understanding of your own self-awareness. What can I do? What can't I do? What do I need to develop to make my skills what they need to be? What do I need to look at to know what the industry requires? It's about the labour market again. What does the industry require? What have I got to do?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so really aligning that with where the industry's going. Great tip, thank you. And Richard, what would your tips be?
Be visible. Don't be afraid to do stuff and to say yes to things, whether that's digital or physical. Obviously, a bit different at the moment, but generally speaking.
Brilliant, lovely. So that's a really positive note for us to end on today. Before I thank our speakers and close the webinar, Jubril, I think you wanted to briefly mention a future webinar that's coming up as well on neurodiversity. Do you want to say a bit about that?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you to all the speakers and everybody who's joined the Learn to Learn series. Really enjoyed it. We're starting series 2 on Tuesday, the 14th of July. That would be between 12 o'clock and 1 p.m, like this one, on Tuesday. And it's based around neurodiversity and neurominorities. And the title of that one would be Work-Based Strategies to Support Neurominorities. So it's with our referral agency of, I can't remember the name. Sorry. Oh, I forgot their name, sorry. Yeah, it's with our agency that I've been a service user of myself, and they've really helped me with work-based strategies to understand the ways of thinking and the ways of approaching problems, stress, anxiety, depression, and other mental faculties to help me really be empowered. And this, I think it really tied into our career progression, because I have benefited from the service and finished an apprenticeship using the service too, and JGA. So I think it'll be an interesting learn for learners and tutors to be there on the 14th to really discuss how really to implement these strategies for other people and really support others, as well as be aware of your own needs. So I'm going to post a link in the chats here, and just book as usual. It will be the last event there. So just share and share alike. Look forward to seeing you there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jubril. That sounds like a great event, and issue which is, I think, going to be even more important in the world of work over the next few years. So thank you so much for sharing that. A huge thank you to our panel. Huge thanks to Anne and to Louise and to Richard for so generously sharing their excellent insights about how to grow and develop our careers at a time of huge change and uncertainty. And hopefully that's given you some food for thought about how to stay positive, and also the practical steps that we can all take even at a time like this. A huge thank you also to everyone who's attended the other webinars in the series as well, so thank you so much for those. We will be sharing some blogs about the various webinars, and of course the recordings will also be shared as well. I think you can access them once you have filled in the user feedback form after this webinar today as well. And we also very much hope to see you over on the JGA LinkedIn page, where, speaking of building personal brand, there are lots of thoughts and insights being shared as well about learning, career progression, and lots of other useful content too. So thank you so much, everyone. Big thank you to all of our delegates who've come along today. Big thank you to our panel. And we very much hope to see you all again very soon. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Zoe, and everyone.
Thank
Thank
you
you
very
very
much.
much.
Thank you.
Good to see you all.